box under oath giving evidence this very week. What did you make of it as you were watching?
Oh, well, I followed it obviously very closely, and I was in one sense very pleased that the rest of the nation had the opportunity to see her give the sort of answers that she gave with sincerity and conviction and resolve, which was the very way that she presented to me and to Jeff Shaw when we interviewed her about these things back in September of 1995.
Jeff Shaw, people will say, what, the independent from Frankston?
Yeah, Jeff Shaw was a really good friend of mine and the chief executive of Slater and Gordon, who interviewed me with her back in 1995. And
different Jeff Shaw, clearly.
Yeah, tragically, three years later, but did a really good job both in that difficult time at Slater and Gordon and for Slater and Gordon generally. One of the people whose good names have been besmirched in this entire process, but who did the job conscientiously, let me say that.
Next time Brown was the other one.
No, well, he wasn't in the room. And, that's an important point because, it's come out and Nick has said that he was less inclined to accept Julia's explanation for events than Jeff was or I was. And, perhaps one explanation for that is that he wasn't in the room to hear her give those answers, and I was. I said 2 years ago that when a statement that I made was in fact leaked by Nick into the public domain, but which nevertheless is an accurate statement on my part, that I formed the view at the time that she should be accorded the benefit of the doubt and her explanation accepted. And whilst there's other matters that I didn't know about during that interview which have come to my attention since then, I remain of that view. I remain of the view that she's entitled to the benefit of the doubt, and I think her explanation should be accepted. John, my view is that every fair-minded Australian who watched that the other day will come to the same conclusion, and that this matter ought now to be put to an end. Both the tawdry allegations against her, which have persisted for 2 years, and the equally tawdry allegations that in some way Slater and Gordon took inappropriate activities to investigate this or covered it up in any way.
Although
neither of those things have any rational basis in my view.
There clearly are some people in the community who, for whatever reason, have decided that, first of all, you can't pick a liar when there's one sitting in front of you. The Victoria Police can't pick a liar when there's one trying to pull the wool over their eyes, and neither can the Royal Commission.
Yes, well, I guess your statement and mine are like ships passing in the night. My statement to you is that every fair-minded Australian who's actually followed this evidence and saw the way that she presented and gave her evidence ought to come to that conclusion, and in my mind will come to that conclusion.
So you're saying
I've got to say, I very much admired the way she dealt with an issue in her past, which was obviously very painful for her and very, very difficult, and which hasn't gone away, and which has, dogged her public life ever since. Fronted up to every question, didn't shirk a single question. Stayed there for as long.
Didn't hesitate and dealt with it. But you're saying then that the people who are criticising her still are not fair-minded, in other words?
Well, I think if people persist in their criticisms, they need, I think questions need to be raised about that. I've always said that I think for a serving Prime Minister, this sort of issue was a legitimate issue to raise questions about. I've got no problem with the idea that it was legitimate to raise questions about it. But I think what we've seen in the last 2 years is a miscarrying of that way out of control by a whole lot of people into a series of it. There's been any number of amateur and professional and very well funded investigations going on into this, and day after day for the last 2 years, at various moments we've been told that there's about to be this explosion of new evidence which is going to blast her explanation out of the water and make us look like idiots for accepting her explanation 2 years ago, and it's never come. And of course, in recent months, we've come to learn that some of this new evidence, which was being suggested or tried to be found, was in fact the result, or was engaged in the process with inducements of cash. And
well, this is the matter I raised yesterday. The one thing that hasn't been investigated is the claim that $200,000 was on offer to anyone who would stitch up Julia Gillard.
Yeah, and we had week after week. You wait till you see next week's press or tomorrow morning's blog site or whatever, and there's going to be this and such new evidence as has come out, in my view, has been completely unconvincing and stacked up against her consistent and coherent denials. I believe that she is now entitled to have this put behind her, and I think the view that Slater and Gordon arrived at through a conscientious examination of those matters in 1995 ought to be given the credit that it deserves, that it came to the right conclusion, that on the evidence as it was presented, her explanation was entitled to be accepted. She was entitled to be accepted, and I think every fair-minded Australian will now come to that view.
Well, Tony Abbott was in Parliament and elsewhere leading the charge. News Limited, it cannot possibly be avoided. News Limited, in particular the Australian newspaper, have for how long now been pregnant with innuendo without ever in fact delivering a baby.
Oh yeah, and you know, to give Hedley Thomas his due, at least yesterday he wrote an article in the Australian which accepted that she gave convincing explanations for these things, and you know, I was pleased to have seen him do that because he, as you know, has led a pretty fierce forensic attack in relation to her and these events for at least the last 2 years. So I was pleased to see him do that, and I would hope that some of the other people who have been making all sorts of baseless and sometimes really disgraceful allegations will have the decency to come out and say we were wrong too.
10 minutes to 10. Football.
Football.
Football.